Where you at? You trying to take the Shaida? Don't worry. I paid them. That's what the hater's going to say. I bear witness. I bear witness. There's no God worthy of worship. There's no God worthy of worship. Except Allah. Except Allah. Ashu. Allah 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 Assalamu alaikum Muslim friends of the world. The night air in New York City felt different. Under the glow of skyscrapers and city lights, thousands of people gathered for what was announced as a grand Tarawih prayer during Ramadan. Streets that usually echoed with traffic and sirens were filled instead with rows of worshippers standing shoulder to shoulder. Prayer mats covered the ground. Volunteers handed out dates and water. The atmosphere was calm, yet powerful. This was not a small community event. It was one of the largest open Ramadan prayers ever organized in the heart of the city. Muslims from diverse backgrounds, African American, Arab, South Asian, Latino, and converts born in America stood united in prayer. But something even more unexpected was happening. Many non-Muslim residents had come out of curiosity. Some were invited by friends. Others had seen the event trending online and wanted to witness it themselves. They stood quietly at the back, watching the organized rows form with precision. Then the prayer began. The recitation of the Quran echoed through the night, slow, emotional, and deeply moving. Even those who did not understand Arabic could feel the weight of the moment. The city that never sleeps seemed to pause. For some in the crowd, this was not just an event. It was the beginning of a life-changing decision. No one yet realized that by the end of the night, lines would form. Not for food, not for photos, but for something far more personal and profound. And this was only the beginning. As the final supplication ended, the crowd in New York City did not immediately disperse. Instead, small circles began to form. Volunteers and community leaders stayed behind, welcoming questions from anyone who wanted to talk. The organizers, including members of the Islamic Cultural Center of New York, had prepared for dialogue. They knew that events like this spark curiosity, and curiosity was everywhere. A college student asked about the meaning of fasting. A middle-aged couple wanted to understand why Muslims pray 5 times a day. A young man admitted he had only known Islam through news headlines. And tonight felt different. There was no pressure, no loud debates, just calm, open conversations. Speakers explained that Ramadan is about discipline, gratitude, and compassion. They talked about charity, family, and spiritual growth. They addressed misconceptions directly about women's rights, about extremism, about freedom of belief. Each answer was given clearly and respectfully. What surprised many visitors was the sense of community. Strangers were offering food to one another. People from different races and backgrounds were hugging after prayer. There was structure, but also warmth. One woman quietly said, "This is not what I expected." For some attendees, the night shifted from observation to reflection. They were no longer just watching a religious gathering. They were experiencing something personal, something that challenged what they thought they knew. And as conversations deepened, a question began to form in several hearts. What if this faith is for me? The night was far from over. The energy in New York City that night was no longer just curiosity. It was emotional. As conversations continued, a small announcement was made near the main stage. If anyone is interested in learning how to become Muslim, our team is here to guide you. It was simple, no pressure, just an invitation. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a young man stepped forward. He looked nervous but determined. He said he had been studying Islam for months, reading, watching lectures, speaking to Muslim friends. Tonight, he said, something felt clear. The crowd grew silent. A local imam gently guided him through the declaration of faith, the Shaida. His voice trembled at first, but when he finished, the crowd responded with quiet emotion and respectful applause. Some people were in tears, and then something unexpected happened. Another person stepped forward, then another. What began as one individual decision slowly turned into a visible line forming to the side of the stage. Volunteers quickly organized a private space to ensure dignity and sincerity for each person. This was not a spectacle. It was personal. Many of those stepping forward shared similar stories, months of research, private questions, long internal struggles. The Tarawih prayer was not the starting point. It was the final confirmation. The atmosphere was powerful but controlled. Organizers reminded everyone that faith is a serious commitment, not an emotional impulse. Each person was spoken to individually to ensure they understood their decision. By the end of the night, what started as a public prayer gathering had quietly transformed into something historic. In the city known for finance, fashion, and fast-paced life, something deeply spiritual had unfolded, and word of what happened was already beginning to spread beyond New York City. By midnight, the crowd in New York City had thinned, but inside the designated guidance area, conversations were still ongoing. This was no chaotic scene. It was calm, organized, and deeply personal. Each individual who stepped forward was invited to sit down with a volunteer or a mom. They were asked simple but important questions. Have you been learning about Islam before tonight? Do you understand what the declaration of faith means? Are you making this decision freely? The focus was clarity, not numbers. One woman in her 40s shared that she had been reading about Islam for nearly 3 years. She said she was drawn to the concept of direct connection with God. No intermediaries, no hierarchy. Tonight, she explained, I finally felt ready. A university student described how fasting alongside his Muslim roommate during Ramadan changed his perspective. He saw discipline, patience, and kindness. He said, it wasn't what I saw on TV. Another man, a former skeptic, admitted he came only to observe. But hearing the Quran recited live and then listening to explanations about mercy and accountability made him rethink everything. What stood out most was this. None of them described their decision as sudden. It was a journey. Many had spent months, even years, questioning, researching, comparing beliefs, and reflecting privately. The Tarawih gathering did not create their faith overnight. It simply gave them the courage to formalize what had already been growing inside. Outside, the city lights still shimmered across Manhattan's skyline. Traffic slowly returned. The rhythm of normal life resumed. But for those who had taken that step, life would never feel the same again. And as local community centers prepared follow-up classes for new Muslims, one thing became clear. This was not just a viral moment. It was the beginning of many new journeys. By sunrise, the story had already spread beyond the streets of New York City. Clips from the grand Tarawih night began circulating on social media. Videos showed rows of worshipers under the city lights, emotional moments of new converts declaring their faith, and volunteers embracing them with tears and smiles. Within hours, the event was trending locally. Local journalists reached out to organizers from the Islamic Cultural Center of New York for confirmation. Community leaders clarified something important. This was not a staged spectacle, and there was no pressure involved. Every conversion was handled privately, respectfully, and voluntarily. News coverage described it as one of the most significant public Ramadan gatherings in recent years. Commentators highlighted the peaceful atmosphere and the interfaith dialogue that took place alongside the prayers. Reactions across the city were mixed, but largely respectful. Some expressed surprise, others expressed support for freedom of belief. Interfaith leaders emphasized that New York has always been a city of diverse spiritual journeys. In a place where churches, synagogues, temples, and mosques stand within blocks of each other. Religious change is not unheard of, but moments like this are rare. Meanwhile, community centers reported a noticeable increase in inquiries. People were calling, emailing, and visiting to ask simple questions. How do I learn more? What does becoming Muslim really mean? Is there a class I can attend? Organizers responded carefully. They stressed that faith should be built on understanding, not emotion. Orientation sessions were scheduled, mentorship programs were arranged. The focus shifted from celebration to education. Because for those who stepped forward that night, the declaration was not the finish line. It was the first step into a new chapter of life. Days after the historic night in New York City, the excitement began to settle, but the real work was just beginning. For the new Muslims, life did not suddenly become easier or dramatic. In fact, many described the days after their conversion as quiet and reflective. They returned to their normal routines, jobs, classes, families, but with a new sense of purpose. Community mentors from the Islamic Cultural Center of New York and other local mosques organized beginner classes. Topics were simple and practical. How to pray, how to read basic Quranic verses, what fasting truly represents, how to balance faith with everyday American life. There was a strong emphasis on patience. Leaders reminded everyone that Islam is a lifelong journey, not an overnight transformation. No one was expected to know everything immediately. Some converts shared their experiences publicly. One young professional said his biggest fear was how friends might react, but he realized faith is personal. He explained this decision is about my relationship with God. A mother of two said she was moved by the sense of discipline she saw during Ramadan. It's not just rituals, it's structure, purpose, accountability. Not every reaction from society was supportive. Social media included criticism and skepticism, but community leaders encouraged calmness, reminding everyone that freedom of religion is a core American value. What stood out most was this: the story was no longer about numbers. It was about individuals rebuilding their spiritual lives step by step. In a city famous for ambition and fast success, something different was unfolding. A slow, steady journey of faith growing quietly beneath the skyline, and the impact of that Tarawih night was still expanding. As the story continued to circulate beyond New York City, it began to take on a deeper meaning. This was no longer just about one night of prayer. Religious leaders from different faith communities spoke about the importance of peaceful gatherings like the Grand Tarawih. Representatives from churches and synagogues in the city emphasized that moments of open worship and dialogue strengthen social harmony, not weaken it. In a city where diversity is part of daily life, religious expression is part of the culture. Community organizers, including members connected with the Islamic Cultural Center of New York, clarified again that the event was centered on transparency and education. There were no dramatic campaigns, no emotional manipulation, just open doors and honest conversations. Analysts noted something significant. Many of those who embraced Islam that night had already been searching. The public prayer did not convince them. It provided clarity in an environment where they felt safe to ask questions. Interfaith forums began inviting Muslim representatives to share insights about Ramadan, fasting, and spiritual discipline. Universities requested speakers. Community panels were organized to discuss religious freedom and combating misinformation. For many observers, the Tarawih night became a symbol of something larger. In a world often divided by headlines and political tension, ordinary people gathering peacefully for worship and others choosing a new path freely sent a powerful message. Not about superiority, not about competition, but about the human search for meaning. And in the heart of one of the world's most influential cities, that message resonated far beyond a single evening. Weeks later, life in New York City had fully returned to its usual rhythm: fast, ambitious, and unstoppable. The streets were busy again. Headlines moved on. Social media found new trends. But for those who stood in line that night after the Grand Tarawih prayer, everything felt different. The new Muslims were now attending weekly classes, building friendships, learning slowly and sincerely. Some were practicing their first full daily prayers. Others were reading the Quran in English translation for the first time. Step by step, they were building foundations, not just emotionally, but intellectually and spiritually. Community leaders from the Islamic Cultural Center of New York emphasized something important in their follow-up programs. Faith is not proven in one powerful night. It is proven in consistency, patience, and character. What made that Tarawih gathering historic was not simply the number of people who embraced Islam. It was the environment, open, peaceful, transparent, where individuals felt free to make a personal decision without pressure. In a global city known for finance, entertainment, and influence, a different kind of story quietly unfolded. A story about spiritual searching in the modern world. And the skyscrapers of Manhattan still shine brightly. The city still never sleeps. But somewhere among those lights are individuals whose lives were redirected by a single Ramadan night. Not because of hype, not because of force, but because of conviction. And perhaps that is the most powerful message of